The morning I learned that I had inherited the house on Clover Mill Road, I was standing in the break room at work, eating a granola bar over the sink because I had forgotten to bring lunch again. My stepfather's attorney called and explained everything, and I found myself staring at the shiny wrapper in my hand without saying a word for several moments. All I could think about was the kitchen window in that house. The latch had been broken for years. Frank always meant to repair it, but somehow never got around to it. He even kept a notepad on the refrigerator, just for little jobs he planned to finish someday. He had been gone for only 11 days. But before I tell you what happened after that phone call, I need to go back to the summer when I was 12 years old, because that is where this story truly starts. My mother remarried when I was 9. His name was Frank. He was quiet, a little awkward in social situations, and the kind of man who kept his library card in his wallet, right behind his driver's license. Not only did he keep it there, he actually used it. He worked as a civil engineer for the county. He drove a beige sedan that he washed himself every other Saturday morning. Frank was not exciting. He was not the type of stepfather you would see in a movie. He never showed up unexpectedly at school events, never planned dramatic bonding adventures, and never tried to force a connection. Instead, he did small things. He learned which cereal brand I liked best. He lowered the television volume when I was doing homework without being asked. One night, when I was about 10 years old, I had a nightmare and wandered into the living room around 2 in the morning. Frank was already awake. Without making a big deal out of it, he simply moved over on the couch and handed me the other side of the blanket. That was who he was. My mother moved through life as if she was always running late for something. She loved me, at least I believe she did, but loving a child and raising one properly are not always the same thing. She was better at one than the other. By the time I turned 12, she had become focused on something new. She started coming home later and later. Then there were nights she did not come home at all. Frank never criticized her in front of me, not once. Over the years, I have thought about how easy it would have been for him to complain or blame her. Instead, he chose not to. He just kept making dinner. He kept signing my school permission slips. He drove me to school on rainy mornings without waiting for me to ask. When my mother finally left, it happened on a Tuesday in October. She carried 2 suitcases to the door and had a look on her face that suggested she had already left emotionally long before she walked out. After she was gone, Frank sat me down at the kitchen table. He told me the truth in the gentlest way I have ever heard anyone tell it. He said that adults sometimes make decisions that hurt people they love. He told me her leaving was not my fault. Then he said something I have never forgotten. I'm going to stay. He did not say it as reassurance. He said it as a fact, and he stayed. When I was 14, he legally adopted me. I still remember sitting in front of a judge in a small wood-paneled room that smelled faintly of old paper and dust. The judge asked if this was truly what I wanted. I said yes. I meant it more than I had ever meant anything before. After that, we became a very ordinary family. We ate dinner together most nights. We watched nature documentaries on Sundays. Frank taught me how to drive in the parking lot of an empty shopping center. When I graduated, he shook my hand. Then after a brief pause, he pulled me into a hug that lasted several seconds longer than either of us expected. We both acted as if we had not noticed. Life moved forward. I eventually moved 3 hours away. Still, we talked every Sunday morning. Every April he visited, and every April he brought the same brand of coffee because years earlier he had noticed that it was the one I always kept in my kitchen. Frank never forgot details. When I was 27, he was diagnosed with a heart condition. He told me during one of our Sunday phone calls, using the same calm tone he might have used to discuss road repairs. No panic, no drama, just information. This is what is happening. This is the plan. For 3 years, everything remained stable. Then one Thursday in February, it wasn't. Frank died at home, exactly as he had wanted. I drove the 3 hours in less than 2.5. For a week, I stayed in the house on Clover Mill Road and handled everything that needed to be handled. I managed surprisingly well until I found the notepad on the refrigerator. The broken window latch was still written there. So was the leaky faucet. And at the very bottom, written in smaller letters than everything else, was my name followed by a question mark. Just my name and a question mark. To this day, I do not know what he meant by it. And strangely, I am grateful that I never found out. The estate itself was simple. Frank had always kept his paperwork organized. His will was updated regularly and properly prepared. He left the house on Clover Mill Road and most of his savings to me. The total value came to just over $1.9 million. I had no idea he had saved that much money. Frank had always lived quietly and spent carefully. I simply never stopped to think about what decades of discipline might add up to. 11 days after his death, I learned the full amount while standing in that break room eating a granola bar. I cried in my car for 20 minutes. Then I went back inside, returned to my desk, and finished my workday, because that is exactly what Frank would have done. The probate process began in March. According to Mr. Ashford, Frank's attorney, everything looked straightforward. The will was properly witnessed. The language was clear. There were no obvious issues. He told me the process would likely be smooth. He used the word likely. 6 weeks after the funeral, I received a certified letter. My mother was contesting the will. I stood beside my mailbox and read the paperwork twice before walking upstairs to my apartment. I made tea. Then I sat at my kitchen table staring at it until it went cold. I never drank a sip. She claimed that I had somehow exercised undue influence over Frank. The argument was that I had manipulated him into leaving me his estate. According to the filing, I had supposedly taken advantage of his trust and dependency for my own benefit. The accusation felt absurd. Frank was one of the most thoughtful and independent people I had ever known. Yet there it was, a legal document claiming otherwise. Mr. Ashford remained calm. He told me these challenges happened frequently when significant assets were involved. He assured me that we had strong evidence. Then he told me something I did not know. Frank had left a letter explaining exactly why he made the decisions outlined in his will. Apparently, Mr. Ashford had encouraged him to do so years earlier. "Let me handle it," he said. So I did. For the next 2 months, paperwork moved back and forth between attorneys. I collected old cards, photographs, phone records, and anything else that demonstrated the reality of our relationship. While searching through a closet, I found a box. Inside were 23 years of memories, school photos, birthday cards, drawings, keepsakes. One drawing stopped me completely. I had made it when I was 10 years old. A crooked little house, a crooked tree, 2 stick figures standing in the yard. Frank had saved it all those years. The folder was labeled with my name. And suddenly I realized that while I had been busy growing up, Frank had been quietly keeping pieces of my life. The mediation meeting in June went nowhere. For the first time in over 8 years, I sat across a conference table from my mother. She looked older. That was expected. She did not look sorry. That was expected too, but it still hurt. Her attorney argued that Frank had become dependent on my calls and visits. He suggested our relationship had been strategically maintained. He used the word strategically so many times that it almost lost meaning. I barely spoke. Mr. Ashford had advised me to say as little as possible. When I walked back to my car afterward, I thought about Sunday phone calls. I thought about April visits. I thought about coffee, blankets, permission slips, and quiet acts of kindness. I was not worried about losing. I was worried about how ugly the process would become before it was finally over. A week before the hearing, Mr. Ashford called again, and this time, he had important news. While reviewing Frank's records, he had discovered a collection of documents nobody knew about. For 8 years, Frank had written what he called letters of record. They were dated and organized carefully. In them, he documented important moments: Sunday phone calls, holiday visits, conversations, memories. The time I drove 3 hours through a snowstorm because he insisted he was fine after a medical procedure, and I knew he was only pretending. In one letter, he described our relationship as the one I am most proud of in my adult life. Frank kept those records because he was an engineer. He documented things. That was simply part of who he was. And in the end, those letters changed everything. This is part 1 of the rewritten story. Send continue, and I'll rewrite the rest in the same style while keeping the length and story intact.